software development and maintenance in India, offshoring and the direct tax aspects, and this will be taken by Mr. N.C. Hegde, who is a known figure in the Bombay profession. He has been a regular speaker at several forums, and software is something which is greatly involved, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Hegde. His biodata is already with you, so I will not read it out for you, and I request Mr. Hegde to.
So, good afternoon, friends. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, friends. I hope you had a good sumptuous lunch, because I think we will have to probably bear with me, or bear me rather, for the next 2 hours as such. It's going to be a challenge. The good part is that, as you know, in software, and when I mean software here, it's not necessarily only software. I am going to talk more about development centers in India and BPO and KPO units in India, and look at it more from a foreign investor's angle. So, as far as that particular sphere is concerned, there have always been issues, and like in our jurisdiction analysis, and the famous Mauritius cases, where we always believed that with one ruling, with the Azadi Bachao ruling, things had come to an end. There is again a second rung of litigation which again took us back to Vodafone, and that seems to never end. So, similarly, again in relation to software and especially BPO, KPO units, from a foreigner's perspective and a PE perspective, there seems to be again continuous rounds of litigation which have been happening, and a lot of inventive kind of issues raised by the tax department from time to time, and hence this is an issue which is always ongoing. So, any time the time required for that can never be less. There are several case laws. Over and above that, there is also this issue of deputation of personnel that we will come to. So, in my presentation, what I am doing is, and as you have seen the structure or the format of the program, the format of the program is that it covers the entire software and the technology industry really, and there are separate topics allotted to different speakers, and there is bound to be an overlap in the different topics, but I am not going to be actually concentrating on topics which are subject matters of other speakers. So, for example, the earlier speaker spoke more on the outbound part of it. Mr. Rashmin Sangvi gave you an overview, and I think tomorrow you will have sessions which are going to cover tax units, tax issues for KPO, BPO units. So, more from an Indian company's perspective, that as well as there is some amount of again topic which is covered, which is in relation to software issues for again those issues is something I will not cover. Transfer pricing again is a very big issue as far as offshoring is concerned, but that again is a subject matter of a separate topic by itself. I do not want to steal the thunder from those speakers as such, but what I will do is I will only make a reference, and probably that particular speaker will take that topic in much greater detail. So, I will make a reference to that topic wherever relevant, because it is important to know what issue has arisen in relation to a particular topic, but then the detail will be given by that speaker. So, here, as I mentioned, again for the sake of repetition, what I am wanting to cover largely is issues, direct tax issues which arise as a result of a foreign company actually offshoring work or outsourcing work to India, and other typical issues which in relation to deputation of personnel, and a little bit I will make a reference to some of the IT or KPO some of the tax issues for the IT and the IT enabled units, because ultimately that also has an impact on a foreigner whether he wants to set up in India or not. So that is largely going to be my focus area. So what do I intend to cover? First, I look at what is actually software development or maintenance, what does it really refer to, and why is it that we are discussing this particular topic today. You then move on to, in more granular detail, what is the choice of vehicle. Does he have a choice of coming through different entities, and what route do most companies prefer? And here of course I will try and share as much as practical experience as possible over my whatever limited years of experience in this particular topic, and why certain decisions have been made in relation to a particular choice of entity. Selection of appropriate jurisdiction. Jurisdiction analysis, we were just joking during the lunch time that this has become like a cookie cutter. Everybody has in the big four 3 or 4 slides on jurisdiction analysis, on which jurisdiction that you should be coming from. So here what I am going to be doing is looking at jurisdiction again from a software perspective, not purely an investment perspective. So as an investment holding company, your jurisdiction may be different, but from a software perspective, is there a particular jurisdiction which is probably better than another jurisdiction? And then as I mentioned, direct tax issues in relation to the PE exposure, in relation to deputation of personnel, outsourcing out of India is only one slide which I have taken, because Mr. Sanyal must have covered that probably in much greater detail, and he being an industry expert, I don't think I can add more value than what he can. So I am going to confine myself to just a brief mention of that. And finally, as I said, a little bit on the tax holiday and the on-site development, which deals with tax issues of units which are located in India. So what do you mean by software development and maintenance? Well, software development maintenance, as we know, and as you know, this industry really took great strides in the 90s after the liberalization, and when a lot of people actually started, it helped us Indians to really hold our heads high, because when we used to earlier travel, people used to look at India as probably a land of snake charmers and whatnot. But after the IT enabled and the software industry really took great steps in 90s, we were all then started, people started admiring Indians, because they believed that software was something that was kind of Latin and Greek for a lot of developed countries. And they said, how are these Indians able to crack the code, the software code? So that is something that really catapulted us in the eyes of a lot of foreigners. And I have actually been sometimes asked by people, how is it that you Indians are so brainy, and that whenever it comes to a software project, that Indians are the first choice. So the entire act of software development is the activity of computer programming, which is the process of writing and maintaining the source code. And in terms of the Rangachari report, of course I am not an expert, technical expert on software development, but the Rangachari report is an excellent report for those of you who would want to read a little bit on the software development. And they were concerned with issues which were affecting the IT sector, and there is again a reference to the Rangachari committee report when I talk about issues affecting the IT industry, the BPO KPO units. So what the Rangachari committee report says, that the stages of the software development cycle in the simplest model, to put it in very simple terms, is that first there is a little bit of an envision and planning. So you envisage a particular idea. So there is software required in order to execute a particular program per se. So there is this stage which is called the envisioning and the planning. So how do you exactly go about doing this particular software project? So which is the first step of the software project. Once having done that, then you get into the granular point of how to design the overall software project. What is it required? Is there some kind of, what do you require on board? What is the kind of activity which you will do? So you will have to scope out, you will have to design the entire software project. Then having done that, then you start developing it, and at the time of development you may have some feedback on earlier projects. You may actually then sit with the client's team to understand what exactly is the purpose of the software program, what is it that is required in the software code or the projects. Sit down and drill down and on that basis, on a more of a collaboration basis, you then develop that entire software code. This is very important because as you will see, that's where really the India story comes into the picture, because very often projects conceived outside India, envision and planning done outside India. There is also a certain amount of design which is contemplated, and then that design is broken down into several sub-components of development, and that is where a part of the development is often outsourced to India, and that's why those term the India development centers. So if you have development centers of Microsoft and the Googles of the world, the IBMs of the world, these are all the India development centers, which is nothing but a part of item number 3 here, which is to do with developing of a software code where a decision is taken outside and probably development is then happening here. Of course, you have a reverse scenario also now in relation to Indian companies going out and developing, and if you have an Indian customer, then clearly and he is looking at a software provider who is based outside India. So for example, if he is a Philippines, is also into maybe software development, although they are more into the lower end of the activity, then a development he may decide to outsource a part of the development outside India. So this model can work in any which way, but largely we have seen that foreign companies would outsource work in relation to the development stage in India. Then there is that period of testing where you have something of a prototype, you need to test the prototype in relation to the code, you run a kind of an initial project to see whether the software program is really able to deliver whatever is the client is required, and finally after that test is met and you believe that the software code is working, that there are no bugs really in relation to the software, then the final stage which comes in is the development and the maintenance. And as we see, maintenance has been stretched at times in terms of whatever the taxpayer wants. So if the taxpayer wants the software maintenance should be treated as software per se, then sometimes courts have gone and said that it is software. On the other hand, sometimes a person says no, software maintenance is not software, but it is not royalty, it's only an activity or a service, and it's a low level activity after all the hard work is done. Then people are stretched to say that software maintenance is only a maintenance activity. But the important point is that it is not as routine or rudimentary as maintenance of plant and machinery, where you really require probably lower level of intelligence or intellectual input into maintenance, whereas in software maintenance it is actually modifying a software system. Is the software system not doing well, or as you know, in case of typically all of these ERP systems and all, you have an additional module to fit in, or you have some new requirements which come up, then you have to modify the software system, and that is where software maintenance also comes into play. Product is the result of software product is the result of software development, whereas software maintenance results in a service being delivered to the customer. In terms of a study by NASSCOM says that these are the 3 typical contractual structures which are prevalent in India. One is the contracted development. That means the customer gets in touch with you and says, here is a contract to develop computer software for me. The cost sharing contribution and the entrepreneur is not seen very often in relation to IT or IT enabled to software projects. It's seen more in the R&D space and more in the pharma space, because that is a case where 2 people come together and say, okay, we will get into certain amount of research and development, and after that research and development is over, we do a cost sharing of the expenses. If it is successful, then the contributions flow either in a pre-decided pre-decided formula, or you could be a complete entrepreneur model where you decide to bear all the costs yourself, and therefore with all risks, all the rewards also accrue to you. So these are the 3 type of contractual structures which are prevalent for software development. Most software projects in terms of the Rangachari committee report say that there is a distributed development model, something which I mentioned, where phases and projects are outsourced or performed across different sites or departments. So it's not as if it is all done out of one particular centralized location, but it is distributed to all different departments, and that is where work packages are delegated to external vendors. And here you may have, if as you see in the case of most banks and financial services powerhouses outside India, you take any number, so many of those units in Mumbai, in Hyderabad, in Chennai, and all those, where you will have a particular applications one by one. First they decide to move certain work to India, and then department by department will slowly move most work to some of these offshore centers into India, and again they will do it part by part. The entire work is not completely delegated to India. The customer facing, of course, will be with the particular person who is seeking the delivery there outside India, but parts of it which are not within a supervision control are then moved on to India. And majority of the captive IT development centers in India and the principal R&D companies fit within the above profile. As per a NASSCOM study, about 750 development centers are working from India, and they actually contribute to more than 1/3 of the total export revenues for the fiscal 2012. So this shows the importance that in terms of total IT export revenues, data centers, and these 750 data centers are real major players, because they are contributing nearly 1/3 of the total revenues. And that is why, as you have seen over the years, the software industry has had a very strong lobby. NASSCOM or whatever it is, over the right from 81, if you see the history of the tax holiday was first started in the SEEPs, and the sections 10A actually was enacted to kind of what is called to bring in the tax holiday concept, and that was more of a location specific, which was in the Santa Cruz export processing zone and a couple of other zones. But then, because of the clout of the software industry, year after year the industry was given a tax break, a 10-year tax, first which started off with a 5-year out of a 8-year tax holiday, that was moved from 5 years to 10 years. Then there was probably a talk of 2001-2 that the tax holiday will come to an end. But again, because of the strong lobbying of the industry and the fact that India is doing so much in terms of export, that it contributes largely to exports and also to the huge employment potential that it generates. This was again continued till it finally saw the sunset in 2010-11. So it has always been considered one of the most important industries, and that's why you find that unlike many other industries where regulations are not really in pace, at least as far as the income tax benefits are concerned, IT sector has always enjoyed the best as far as the government this is concerned, attention is concerned. Then a little bit about the R&D development centers. There are a lot of R&D development centers in India as well. And again, the R&D development centers in India are not so much research and development as much as they are developing some portion of the overall research, which has again been outsourced to India. So these are again related to development, enhancement and maintenance of IPs, and the intellectual property is normally your IP rights will always reside outside India. And what R&D centers in India will perform is that they will perform a job of probably the lower end of the R&D activities, though the tax department of course would like to believe that in India there is much more being done than what is being offered to tax. So that is something that has always been a tug of war between the tax department and the taxpayer. The important point that most foreign investors would want to kind of convey to the government is that the risks and the control of the costs also are completely borne by the principal R&D company. So it's not as if India here is acting as an entrepreneur. It is only acting as a contracted R&D, where you are doing R&D for a specific purpose within a specific whatever is your mandate that you have been given to, and entire risks and rewards are being borne by the principal R&D company. Some relevant laws and regulations governing the software industry, and as you can see, labor laws, Indian contract, FEMA, Income Tax Act. I think an important one which is not highlighted here is also in relation to service tax, and which has also become a very major factor, especially the manpower supply, which can also be a significant cost